This is the first sign of a B12 deficiency that you may be suffering from. Hey Wellness Warrior, I'm Dr. Nick Zarowski, and B12 is so incredibly important to your overall health. But the bad news is that you're unable to produce it in your body, meaning you have to get it from outside sources. And the other bad news is that it is highly likely that you have a deficiency because it's so common. So we're going to talk about the signs and symptoms that show up first. We're going to talk about what B12 actually does in your body and then how to get yourself at a good, healthy, sufficient level using food. So let's go ahead and dive in talking about what B12 does. Well, it's very important for healthy nerves and a healthy functioning nervous system. Your brain health is at stake here. It also is very important for red blood cell production, which we'll talk about in just a second, what happens when you don't have enough red blood cells and the symptom that will show up from that. It also is very important for healthy DNA. And we want to protect our DNA at all times so that we can protect ourselves from a future of disease. Now let's look at some of the symptoms here. And remember, whenever we look at all these different symptoms of having a vitamin deficiency, we should be checking a few off before we start saying, hey, that's me, right? It shouldn't just be one. There should be a couple. Let's go ahead and talk about the first one. That's dizziness. Dizziness is a very common sign that can show up as you get a vitamin B12 deficiency. Swollen tongue too. Now, this is something that typically happens after you've had a deficiency for a while. You'll notice your tongue starts to feel a little bit larger. I've seen patients have this. They come in and they're like, I can literally feel that my tongue is like oversized and I'm like almost stumbling over my words because of my tongue being larger. Pins and needles. So you're starting to get some pins and needles in the hands and the feet. So watch out for that. Breathlessness too. Okay, so you just are, feeling like you're having shortness of breath all the time. We want to watch out for that. Now, weakness and fatigue is a big one. Why would you get weakness and fatigue with a B12 deficiency? Simply because these red blood cells are going to carry oxygen. If you don't have enough B12, well, the red blood cells aren't oxygenating the body properly. And then you're going to feel weakness and fatigue. You'll also get a lot of brain fatigue as well. Why? Simply because your brain is a huge consumer of oxygen. If you don't have enough of it, the brain can't work properly. I want to share something with you real quick while we're on this topic though. One of the things about B12 that's very interesting, and it's kind of a few fun facts, and that is that you're going to have about 3 years of B12 that is capable of being stored in the liver. Now, if you don't have it, you don't have it, and your liver can't store it if you don't have it. But the point is the body's very smart, and so you don't run out because this is so critically important. Your liver can store it for a while. The other thing that's very important about B12 to know is that it's water soluble, meaning that you're not going to overdose on B12. That some people have this idea that, well, I don't want to take too much of it. Well, your body will just flush it out if you consume too much of it. So that's that water soluble part that's very important. The other thing, it's a fun fact about B12 is that it can either go by B12 or cobalamin. This is one of those things that's important to know just simply because when you're reading vitamin labels or reading food labels, that's what B12 is. It's cobalamin. Now let's dive right back into some of these different signs and symptoms, and then we're going to talk about the one that shows up first. Now let's look at visual disturbances. We'll also find mood, okay? It's associated with anxiety and depression and poor mood, so we want to make sure that we're watching out for that. And then also a racing heart. If your heart just speeds up for no reason, well, there's a good chance that you have a vitamin B12 deficiency. Now, here's the thing that I want to talk about as well before I get to the first sign that shows up is why does this happen in the first place? A B12 deficiency can happen for a lot of reasons. One might be that you're on medication. As you get older, a B12 deficiency is more likely to happen. If you have gut inflammation or gastrointestinal problems, one of the things that can happen is you can start to lack what's called intrinsic factor. This is a protein that is absolutely necessary for you to be able to break down B12. If you lack intrinsic factor, you'll also more likely have a deficiency. So then we look at these factors, and we also have to look at the fact that maybe your diet is just deficient in it in its entirety. So we have to look at all potential reasons why you have low B12. But as we look at these symptoms, the number one that shows up is going to be weakness and fatigue. And the reason that this weakness and fatigue shows up first is because you're lacking proper red blood cell production, which is going to lack proper oxygenation throughout the body. Many people will go and start using B12 and find that they have this surge in energy, and it's because of this reason. Now let's talk about healthy sources of B12 because this is where you're going to get it. You're going to find B12 in red meat. You're going to find B12 in eggs. You're also going to find it in dairy products as well. Those are going to be some of the best sources. You'll also be able to find it in fish and poultry. Now, if I have a B12 deficiency personally, I'm going to look towards a supplementation in order to help me with this. But there's something you should know, is that if you lack the ability to break down B12 properly, using supplementation, eating more food isn't going to fix the problem. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're supplementing with a sublingual B12. It'll come in the form of a tablet, you'll put it under your tongue, and it'll help increase your B12 levels, but you aren't going to take it in the form of a capsule where you would swallow it, because that's not going to solve your deficiency issue. So when we look at the clinical research, one of the things that has been found is that a sublingual B12 works excellent. I'll put a link in the description to one that I use in my clinic so that you have access to it. So this is how you're going to make sure that you have proper levels of B12, increasing B12 rich foods, using supplementation, watching out for these different symptoms that you may be facing. As I said from the very beginning, a B12 deficiency is very common. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And also, I think you're really going to like this video next.